Emily Carter's mornings always began with quietness, the kind of silence that felt heavy instead of peaceful. She lived in a small, neat house in Portland, Oregon, where everything looked calm from the outside, but inside her heart, nothing felt settled anymore. Every day followed the same rhythm, and that rhythm had slowly drained her spirit. She stood in the kitchen on a cool morning, listening to the soft hum of the kettle and watching the sunlight fall across the counter. It was a warm sight, but she didn't feel any warmth inside herself. Her husband, Thomas, sat at the dining table just as he had for years. He was older than her, much older, and their lives no longer flowed together. He wasn't a bad man. He never shouted, never hurt her, never created drama. But he also never reached for her heart, never noticed the tiredness behind her smile, never sensed the loneliness that grew inside her day after day. Emily often wondered if he ever looked at her properly anymore, or if she had become part of the house's furniture, useful, familiar but invisible. She prepared breakfast quietly, moving through the routine she knew too well. She set the plate in front of him, and he gave her the same polite nod he always did. "Thank you," he said without lifting his eyes from the newspaper. His voice was calm, but it carried no emotion, no connection. She stood there for a moment, waiting for something more, something human, but nothing came. And she felt that familiar ache returning, the one she tried to push down every day. Her life with Thomas was not cruel, just empty. They barely talked beyond surface-level questions. "How was your day? Did you pay the bill? What's for dinner?" There was no laughter anymore, no warmth, no moments that made her feel like a woman who mattered. She had learned to hide her sadness behind a calm face, but the heaviness inside her grew stronger with each passing month. But there was one part of her life that never felt empty: her son, Evan. At 17, he had a quiet strength that amazed her. He paid attention to things others missed. He noticed when she seemed overwhelmed. He could sense her sadness even when she tried to hide it behind chores or small talk. Sometimes he looked at her with worry, and that look alone made her hold herself together. He was the one person who still made her feel seen. That morning, Evan walked into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He gave her a soft smile, the kind that warmed her heart instantly. "Morning, Mom," he said, and just that simple greeting made her breathe a little easier. He had a gentle way of speaking, a way that made her feel like she mattered. "How did you sleep?" he asked, and something about the sincerity in his voice made her chest tighten. She didn't want him to worry, so she nodded and said, "Fine." Even though she hadn't slept well in months, Evan glanced toward his father, then back at her, as if he could sense the tension she never spoke of. He stepped closer and squeezed her shoulder gently before grabbing his backpack. That small gesture made her feel grounded again. She didn't know how she would survive the emotional emptiness of her marriage if not for her son's quiet presence. He was her anchor in a life that felt like it was drifting away from her. After dropping Evan at school, she drove to her job at a small bookstore downtown. The bookstore was her escape, a place where she could breathe without feeling judged or ignored. She loved organizing shelves, talking to customers, and losing herself in the soft music that played throughout the store. It was the only place where she felt like her real self, the version of her she had almost forgotten. But even there, her thoughts circled back to her life at home. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt appreciated, or the last time someone had asked her how she felt, not what she did, not what she cooked, not what she needed to complete, but how she truly felt inside. Her marriage had become a long conversation without emotion, a home without warmth. That morning, at the bookstore counter, she caught herself thinking about the moment she had watched Thomas sip his coffee earlier. He had looked so distant, so unaware of her existence that it had sparked a quiet fear inside her. She wondered if this was how the rest of her life would look, days repeating like a loop, her heart slowly shrinking until she couldn't feel anything anymore. On her drive home that evening, the question wouldn't leave her mind. Is this the life I'm meant to stay in? Is this all there is for me? She wasn't asking for grand romance or dramatic gestures. She simply wanted to feel understood, valued, and emotionally alive again. She wanted someone to see her, not just exist beside her. When she reached home, she saw Evan sitting on the porch steps, waiting for her. He looked up with concern the moment she stepped out of the car. His eyes softened as if he already knew her heart was heavy. Long day? He asked. She tried to smile, but it didn't fully reach her eyes. Evan stood up and wrapped his arms around her in a simple, warm hug. And as she leaned into him, she realized something powerful. She wasn't completely alone. Her marriage might feel lifeless, but her bond with her son was real, strong, and full of emotional truth. He was the one person who made her feel grounded. The one connection that kept her heart from closing completely. But deep inside her, a quiet truth was forming something she could no longer ignore. Something inside her was about to change, and part of her was terrified. But another part felt ready. The rain had been falling since morning, tapping softly against the bookstore windows as customers rushed in and out. Emily didn't mind the rain. It made the store feel warmer, safer, almost like a small world she could hide inside. She was busy arranging a table of new arrivals when she heard a voice behind her. A voice filled with surprise and a little disbelief. Emily? Emily Carter? She turned quickly, almost dropping a stack of books. Standing in front of her was Michael Bennett, a name she hadn't spoken or heard in nearly 20 years. He looked older, of course everyone did, but something about him was still exactly the same. His eyes held the same warmth, and his smile carried the same easy charm she remembered from her early 20s. She felt her breath catch for a moment. Michael? Is that really you? He laughed softly. I can't believe it. I walked in thinking I'd grab a book for the flight. And then there you were. Emily's heart raced with an emotion she hadn't felt in a long time. Not attraction. Not anything improper. Just surprise mixed with a strange bittersweet happiness. Michael had been a close friend once. Someone she trusted deeply. Someone she used to talk with for hours when she was young and full of dreams. What are you doing in Portland? She asked. Work trip, he replied. I live in Seattle now. I'm only here for a couple of days. He paused, studying her face with a gentle curiosity. You look good, Emily, really good. She laughed, a natural, warm laugh she didn't even know her body remembered how to make. It felt freeing, like a piece of her old self had just slipped back into place. They stood there talking, catching up like 30 minutes were only 3 seconds. She told him about the bookstore, about Evan, and a little about life. He told her about his job, his travels, and the years that had shaped him. There was no flirting, no unspoken promise, no dangerous energy. It was just two people reconnecting after a long time, yet it stirred something tender inside her. A reminder of who she used to be before life became so heavy and quiet. Michael pointed to a novel on the front table. We used to talk about this author, remember? You always said their stories made you cry. Still do, she admitted. You haven't changed, he said softly. She felt something slip inside her chest at those words. She had changed so much that sometimes she couldn't recognize herself. But hearing him say it made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. They talked until his phone buzzed with a reminder. My meeting, he sighed. I have to go. But it was really good seeing you, Emily. You too, she said, meaning every word. Before leaving, he hesitated for a second. Maybe I'll stop by again before I leave town. She nodded. and he gave her a warm smile before walking out into the rain. When the door closed behind him, Emily felt a strange mix of joy and confusion swirling inside her. She tried to focus on stocking shelves again, but her mind kept drifting back to their conversation. It wasn't Michael himself that unsettled her. It was how alive she had felt while talking to him. How easy it had been to smile. How natural her laughter had sounded. That evening, when she walked into her house, the familiar heaviness greeted her instantly. Thomas was in the living room watching television, the volume low, the room dim. He looked over with the same expression he always wore, calm, distant. "Tired. You're home late," he said without emotion. "There was a rush at the store," she replied. Though she wasn't really late. He nodded, eyes already drifting back to the screen. And just like that, the warm spark she had felt earlier faded. The house felt cold again, the silence stretching long and thin between them. She changed clothes, made dinner, and moved through the evening like a shadow. Barely noticed, barely spoken to. After dinner, as she washed the dishes, she thought of Michael's smile, the way he had listened to her, like her words meant something. It wasn't romantic longing. It was the longing to feel seen. Later that night, there was a soft knock on her bedroom door. Evan peeked in. "Mom?" She turned. "Yes?" He stepped inside, his face calm but observant. "You seem different today. Happier, I think." Evan nodded but didn't fully believe her. "You know, you don't have to pretend with me." She sat on the edge of the bed, and he sat beside her. Evan had always been her emotional mirror. He saw everything she tried to hide. "It was just someone I used to know," she finally said, keeping her voice steady. "Someone from a long time ago. Someone important." She hesitated. "Someone who reminded me of who I used to be." Evan didn't push. Instead, he put a hand on her arm. "I'm glad you smiled today, Mom. You don't smile enough." Her eyes softened. "I know." His presence alone steadied her heart. Evan was her strength, her comfort, the one person who kept her from completely breaking under the quiet pressure of her life. But as she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, one thought stayed with her. Why did talking to Michael feel like breathing for the first time in years? She didn't have an answer yet, but she knew this something inside her had started to wake up. Something she didn't understand, something she wasn't ready to talk about. And she had no idea how much it would change everything. In the weeks that followed, the bookstore became more than just Emily's workplace. It became the place where her heart slowly began to wake up. Michael kept his promise and returned. Sometimes he bought a book. Sometimes he just stopped by to talk. And sometimes he simply smiled at her from across the room, as if he understood her thoughts before she even spoke. Their conversations stayed respectful and gentle, never crossing lines. Yet something inside her shifted every time he appeared. He brought a different kind of energy into her life. He remembered small details she once told him. He asked questions that showed he cared. He listened, really listened, in a way she had almost forgotten people could. Emily didn't seek romance. She didn't crave something forbidden. What she longed for was connection, human warmth, and Michael, without even trying, reminded her that such warmth still existed in the world. But with this new feeling came guilt. Not guilt for anything she did, she had done nothing wrong, but guilt for the emotions she could no longer deny. Emily had never imagined her heart could feel alive around someone else while still being married. She carried that guilt quietly, like a weight she couldn't set down. One evening, she stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes while the sound of the television drifted from the living room. Thomas sat in his usual chair, his eyes fixed on the news, his face expressionless. He had barely said more than a handful of words to her all day. The distance between them felt wider than it had ever been, and Emily felt it pressing against her chest. She looked at him for a long moment. His hair had thinned more. His shoulders slumped slightly. He was aging in front of her. Yet he didn't seem aware of how much she had changed too. They lived side by side, but their hearts were miles apart. She wasn't angry at him. She wasn't resentful. She just felt invisible. As she dried her hands, a quiet voice came from behind her. "Mom?" She turned to see Evan standing in the doorway, his backpack still slung over his shoulder. His eyes were searching her face again, the same way he always did when he sensed something was wrong. "You okay?" he asked softly. She forced a small smile. "Just tired." But Evan stepped closer, studying her with the same quiet intuition he always had. "No, it's more than that." Something inside her loosened. Her shoulders sagged. She didn't want to burden him, but she also couldn't pretend anymore. "I'm just confused," she whispered. Evan didn't move for a moment. Then he gently placed his hand on her arm. "Is it about Dad?" Emily felt her throat tighten. She didn't want her son to see her sadness, but he already did. "I feel alone, Evan," she admitted in a soft, trembling voice. "Your father and we don't connect anymore. We don't talk. We don't understand each other. And I don't know how to fix it." Evan didn't speak right away. He looked down, then back at her with eyes full of quiet hurt. Not for himself, but for her. "You've been carrying this alone," he said gently. "For a long time." She nodded, tears forming but not falling. He stepped closer and hugged her tightly. Not like a child needing comfort, but like a son who loved his mother deeply. "You're not alone, Mom," he whispered. "I'm here, always." His words steadied her heart more than anything else could. Emily held on to him, realizing how much he had grown not just in age, but in emotional strength. He had become the one stable part of her life. The one person who made her feel understood without effort. Later that night, after Evan went to his room, Emily sat on her bed thinking about everything: her marriage, her loneliness, the guilt she carried, and Michael's unexpected return. She wasn't looking for a new relationship. She wasn't trying to destroy her old one. She was simply a woman who felt lost and tired. A woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be emotionally alive. And then, just as she was drifting into thought, her phone buzzed. A simple text from Michael appeared. "Are you all right? You seemed a little quiet today." Her heart fluttered. Not because of romance, because someone noticed. Someone cared enough to ask. She typed back a short message, keeping it simple and respectful. "Just a long day. Thank you for checking." His reply came a moment later. "If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." She stared at her phone, conflicted. The kindness made her feel warm, but also uneasy. She didn't want to build an emotional bridge that could lead to something she didn't intend. Yet she also couldn't deny how comforting his words felt. Over the next week, she kept her distance, trying to sort through her emotions. But when Michael visited the bookstore again, he didn't push. He didn't ask personal questions. He didn't bring up their messages. Instead, he simply talked to her the way a friend would, softly, kindly, with genuine care. One afternoon, as they were talking, Michael paused mid-sentence and looked at her with gentle seriousness. "Emily, are you happy?" Her breath caught. No one had asked her that in years. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Michael nodded gently as if he understood. "I hope one day you will be," he said before leaving. His words echoed in her mind long after he walked out. That evening, as Emily sat alone in her room, she realized her heart was caught between the life she had, the emptiness she felt, and the possibility of becoming someone stronger, someone who didn't live only in shadows. She didn't know what would happen next, but something inside her had changed. and she could no longer pretend she didn't feel it. The question Michael asked, "Are you happy?" did not leave Emily's mind. It stayed with her during work, during dinner, during those long silent evenings when Thomas sat in front of the TV while she wandered through the house like a quiet shadow. She tried to ignore the question, but it followed her like a whisper she couldn't escape. Days passed and the weight inside her chest grew heavier. She kept trying to be patient, kept trying to be the calm, steady wife she had always been, but something had changed inside her. She felt restless, like her heart wanted to breathe after years of holding everything in. One cold evening, she stepped outside onto the porch. The sky was dark blue, and the air carried the sharp smell of winter. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat down, hoping the cold would clear her thoughts. Instead, it made her loneliness feel sharper. She looked back at the house, the quiet rooms, the dim lights, the tired routine that had become her life. Nothing terrible had happened in her marriage. There were no fights, no cruelty, but there was also no warmth, no emotional closeness, no real partnership. She had grown into a different woman, and Thomas had stayed exactly the same. They were no longer walking side by side. They were simply existing under the same roof. She didn't hear Evan come outside until he sat next to her. He didn't speak right away. He just leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching the dark street with her. After a moment, he turned his head. "Mom, you look like you're carrying a whole world on your shoulders." Emily let out a quiet breath. "Maybe I am. Is it about Dad?" Her throat tightened. Evan always saw straight through her. "I don't want to hurt him," she murmured. "He's a good man, but I feel alone, and I don't know how to make that stop." Evan looked at her with gentle sadness. "Have you told him how you feel?" She shook her head. "I don't even know where to start. We don't talk, not really. We live together, but we don't live with each other." Evan was silent for a long moment, thinking. Then he said something that surprised her. "You've spent years trying to keep everyone else comfortable. Maybe it's time to think about yourself too." Emily felt tears sting her eyes. She had never wanted her son to carry her pain, but his words didn't feel heavy. They felt honest. "What if I make the wrong decision?" she whispered. "Then you'll fix it," he said simply. "But staying unhappy forever isn't a decision. It's a slow way of disappearing." His words hit her deeply. She had been disappearing bit by bit, year after year, into a quiet, colorless life. And she didn't want that anymore. Later that night, after Evan went to bed, Emily sat alone in her room, staring at the wall. She thought about her marriage, her responsibilities, her dreams, and the woman she used to be before life became so heavy and routine. She didn't want to destroy anything. She didn't want drama. She just wanted to feel whole again. And for the first time, she understood something clearly. She didn't need to leave her marriage. She didn't need to force a new beginning. She simply needed space to find herself again. The next morning, she woke early, heart racing with nervous courage. She walked into the living room where Thomas sat at the table sipping his coffee. The moment he looked up at her, she felt her chest tighten, but she didn't back down. "Thomas," she said softly, "I need to talk to you." He set his cup down, surprised. "Of course. What's wrong?" Emily sat across from him, hands shaking slightly. "I've been unhappy for a long time," she said carefully. "Not because of something you did, but because we stopped being close. I don't feel connected to you anymore." Thomas blinked in confusion. "Emily, I didn't know you felt that way." "I know," she replied, "because I never said it. I always tried to stay quiet and strong. But it's hurting me now, and I need space to understand what's happening inside me." He looked down at his hands. "Are you saying you want to leave?" No, she said instantly. I don't want to destroy anything. I just want to find myself again. I want to figure out how to feel alive, not stuck. I want time to think about us. And about me. Thomas swallowed hard, clearly shaken. I didn't realize I was losing you. You're not losing me, she said gently. But something has to change. For both of us. For the first time in years, Thomas really listened. Not politely. Not absent-mindedly. Truly listened. And that alone made her feel lighter, as if she had been holding a breath she finally released. When she left the house that morning, she didn't feel hopeless. She felt something new, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She wasn't making a reckless choice. She wasn't chasing another man. She wasn't running from responsibility. She was simply choosing herself for the first time in a very long time. And she wasn't alone. Evan was by her side, her anchor, her quiet strength. He was the reminder that she wasn't fading away, she was still here, still alive, still capable of growing. As she drove to the bookstore, the morning light washed across her face. She didn't know what her future looked like. She didn't know where her heart would lead her next. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was the beginning of a new chapter, not of breaking apart, but of becoming whole again.